I didn't walk in through the main elevator. Old habit. When you actually own 51% of a company, you stop needing people to see you arrive. The music bleeding out of the Alder Company. Penthouse wasn't loud enough to cover the sound of Julian Vance's voice. I heard him before I saw him, that polished, NPR-trained baritone he uses when he wants a room to think he's smarter than the CFO. Honestly, if we're doing the whole anniversary theme, he was saying, I should warn you all. Victoria's been threatening to trade me in for a quieter model. But since I basically live here, I let her call me her husband tonight. Laughter. The wet, sycophantic kind. Richard Kowalski slapped Julian on the back like they were sharing a cigar lounge instead of a corporate milestone. Victoria didn't correct him. She just lifted her champagne flute and tapped Julian's arm, the way she does when an intern makes a bad joke in a debrief. Don't be unprofessional. Jules, that was the closest she ever came to drawing a line. I stepped into the edge of the light. Hi, I said, keeping my voice even. The actual husband. Nice to finally put a face to the calendar invites. The laugh that died in Richard's throat was audible. Julian blinked, recalibrated in real time, and did what he always does. He pivoted into performance. He plucked the half-empty glass out of Victoria's hand and extended it toward me. Grin still tacked on like a badge. Nate, right? God. Sorry. Man. We were just giving the boss a hard time. Do me a solid. Grab us two more from the bar? Whatever she's drinking. Victoria finally looked at me then. No warmth. Just that tight little flicker of irritation she reserves for anything that disrupts her schedule. He's joking. Nate, you didn't have to come up. I told Evelyn we'd only be an hour. You told Evelyn. I repeated, ignoring the glass he was holding out like a prop. Funny, you didn't tell me, because you said you weren't coming, she said, already turning back to a VP from mergers. You said the proxy paperwork was more important. It was. It still is, which is why I had the tablet in my coat pocket. Changed my mind. I said, brought something. I didn't pull the Cartier box out of my inside pocket. Not yet. That was for later, when she and I were alone, and I could ask her which version of herself she wanted to keep being. Instead, I nodded toward the AV tech loitering near the screen. The kid recognized me. Everyone who processes payroll recognizes a silent name on the cap table and killed the anniversary slideshow without asking Victoria for permission. Nate, she said, sharp now. Warning shot. Relax. I told her, thumbing the tablet awake. Board business. I tapped the wireless display. The Alder Company. Internal registry loaded. Clean and undeniable. At the top of the chain, Class B supervoting shares. Holder, Victoria A. Whitmore. Delegated voting proxy, Nathaniel C. Whitmore. Effective date, our wedding day. 5 years ago. Digital signature verified. Notarized. Refreshed every January. The room went very still. Richard cleared his throat. Nathaniel, this is hardly the time for... It's exactly the time. I cut in, still smiling. Not the Julian kind of smile, just the one that doesn't reach the eyes. Julian introduced himself as my wife's husband. Seemed like the board deserved a quick refresher on whose name is actually on the bylaws. Julian laughed. Too loud. Jesus. Man, it's a nickname. You know how it is in this building. We're basically a married couple and the company's a kid. Victoria turned fully around. Her cheeks were flushed. But whether it was the champagne or the fact that I just asserted ownership in front of her chairman, I couldn't tell. That's enough, she said. But she wasn't talking to Julian. Is it? I asked her. The silence stretched. Someone behind me coughed into a napkin. Evelyn, leaning against the far wall with her arms crossed. Didn't say a word, but she tilted her head at me, the tiniest nod. Push. So I pushed. Julian, I said, glancing back at him. You want to be the husband? Great. Then tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. You sit in on the comm committee call and explain why the CEO's assistant has a discretionary Amex limit higher than our VP of compliance. Since you're family, I assume you're filing those receipts like a good spouse. His smile cracked. just a hairline fracture. But Victoria saw it. He doesn't need to explain anything, she said, stepping between us. Her voice dropped, the tone she uses when she thinks she's protecting me from embarrassing myself. You're making a scene because you're bored. Go home. Nate, I'll be there later. She reached out, not to touch me, but to take the tablet out of my hand. I closed it before she could. You sure you wanted to go home? I kept my voice low, just for her. Everyone else faded out, because last I checked, the guy handing you drinks isn't the one keeping your seat warm when Richard tries to split the chairmanship next quarter. Her jaw tightened. Don't do the quiet power thing with me. Not tonight. Then don't let another man introduce himself as your husband in front of the people betting against you. For a second, just a breath, she looked like she might apologize, or at least deflect with something private. Some old shorthand between us from before the IPO, before the 18-hour days. But Julian opened his mouth again. Boss, he said lightly, touching her elbow, we really should circulate. Kowalski's got the Chicago guys waiting. Victoria let him steer her half a step away from me. Half a step, like it was nothing. What's his hair go? Watched the way the room rearranged itself around them. The board pretending they hadn't just seen the fault line. Richard was already pouring another round, laughing about high-strung Whitmores. I pulled the Cartier box the rest of the way out of my pocket. Blue velvet. I turned it over once in my palm, then slid it back in without opening it. On my way out, I passed Evelyn. She fell into step beside me by the elevators. You just made his entire month, she said dryly. He'll spin that, as you being controlling by morning. Let him, I said, hitting the down button. He's been filing expense reports under spousal equivalents since April. HR hasn't flagged it because Victoria signs off blind. Evelyn stopped walking. You're shitting me. Pull the concur logs. I said, Hampton House Club membership. Couple spa package at the Greenwich. Line item description. Executive alignment retreat. Evelyn let out a slow whistle. And you're telling me this now? I'm telling you now because if Victoria asks where I went after I left, I need you to remind her I didn't raise my voice once. The elevator dinged. Empty car. I stepped in. Nate, Evelyn said before the doors closed. She's not sleeping with him. I know, I said. The door started to slide. He wishes it was that simple. If it were just sex, she'd fire him for being sloppy. This is worse. She thinks he's useful. The ride down the garage took 40 seconds. I didn't check my phone until I was in the car. 3 texts from Victoria, all typed in that clipped. Board meeting cadence she uses when she's pissed and doesn't want to sound pissed. We'll talk about the proxy stunt at home. Do not email Richard. Julian was trying to lighten the mood. You made it weird. I didn't answer the first 2. I answered the third. He didn't make it weird. He made it public. There's a difference. She left me on read for 6 minutes, which is her version of screaming into a pillow. Then, I'm staying late to smooth this over. Don't wait up. I typed back. I already waited up once tonight. That was the speech. She didn't reply. I drove the long way back to the apartment, taking the West Side Highway just to kill the impulse to turn around and walk back into that room. By the time I got home, the blue box was sitting on the passenger seat, like a dead weight. I put it in the safe, next to the original signed copy of our postnup, the one that says she keeps Alder, and I keep the voting trust. It was supposed to be symbolic, giving her the reins. A gesture. You built it. Run it. I poured a scotch I didn't drink and scrolled through the contacts on my phone. Found the number for the outside counsel. We keep on retainer for hostile situations. Not because I was going hostile. Not yet. But because Julian Vance needed to learn the difference between a punchline and a liability. At 11:47, the town car pulled up to our building on autopilot. I watched the security feed on my phone. Victoria getting out. Julian hopping out after her like a goddamn valet, carrying her laptop bag. She thanked him. I watched her lips form the words clearly on the lobby cam. Thanks. Jules. Good save tonight. He said something back I couldn't hear through the grainy audio, but she smiled. Small, tired. The kind of smile she used to give me when I brought coffee to her old desk at Davis Polk. during deal season. I locked the phone. When the front door finally opened 2 hours later, I was in the living room with the lights off, reading the paper proxy renewal form for the new fiscal year. She tossed her keys in the bowl. "You're awake. You're late. Don't start." She kicked off her heels, heading straight for the kitchen island. "You humiliated me, Nate, in front of Kowalski, in front of Julian, in front of Julian." I echoed, setting the form down. "That's interesting phrasing." She poured water. "Didn't look at me. He's my chief of staff. He handles the board dinners, so I don't have to micromanage egos. If you can't handle a joke." He called himself your husband. He was riffing. I repeated. I stood, walked over to where she was standing. She finally met my eyes, defensive and exhausted. "You know what the problem is with riffing in a room full of institutional holders? They don't hear a joke. They hear a governance gap. Richard is already drafting a motion to appoint a co-CEO. You think Julian's a little bit as cute now. Wait till he's the one signing off on your capex just to keep the peace." She set the glass down hard. "You don't get to weaponize the proxy just because your feelings are hurt. My feelings aren't hurt, Victoria. My name is..." Silence. The kind that usually forces her to compromise, because she hates inefficiency more than conflict. But she didn't compromise. She just rubbed her temples and said, "Quieter. I cannot do this tonight. It's our anniversary. Can we just, for once, not make everything a power play?" I almost handed her the blue box. Almost. Instead, I said, "When you introduce me to your team as your husband, it's a technicality. When he does it, it's a joke. You want to know why I smiled at the board tonight?" She didn't answer. "Because I realize I've been very polite about letting you forget who actually owns the leverage here. And Julian, he's not polite. He's just uninformed." She stared at me for a long beat, then grabbed her laptop off the counter. "Sleep in the guest room. We'll talk when you're not trying to manage me." "I'm not managing you," I said, watching her walk toward the hall. "I'm managing the risk you keep inviting into your office." She didn't shut the door. That was her concession. Just left it open. The glow of her email lighting up the hallway like a nightlight. I sat back down, opened the tablet, and queued up the Concur data export Evelyn had just forwarded to my secure inbox. Tomorrow, Julian Vance was going to walk into the office thinking he'd won a small. Funny va, thinking the husband was just some background character who brought champagne when asked. I smiled again, alone in the dark, and hit send on a calendar invite for 9 a.m. Subject: Spousal Alignment Retreat, Expense Review. Attendees: J. Vance. E-Cross. N. Wheatmull. No description. None needed. She didn't sleep in the guest room. She slept at her desk, which is the same thing but with better Wi-Fi. I was up at 6. Made coffee, black. No bullshit. And carried a mug down the hall. The door was still open. She was awake, squinting at her dual monitors like the light wouldn't bother her if she just ignored it. "You didn't answer the calendar invite," I said, setting the mug next to her keyboard. "Not on a coaster. Let her deal with the ring." She didn't look up, because it's passive-aggressive. It's efficient. 9 o'clock. Evelyn's already confirmed. That got her to swivel the chair. "You looped Evelyn into whatever this is before you talked to me?" "Evelyn works for the company." "Victoria, you remember the company?" She exhaled through her nose, the way she does right before she tries to steamroll. "Cancel it. Julian's already prepping the Kowalski deck for this morning. I don't have time to audit my own assistant's TE. That's exactly why I sent it." "God." She pushed back from the desk, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "Do you hear yourself? You're acting like I committed fraud. Jules booked a few things under the wrong codes because I told him to prioritize speed over process. That's what a good chief of staff does. He absorbs the friction, so I don't have to. He absorbs the friction." I repeated. Cute way to say he bills the company for a couple's amenities and labels it operational. Her eyes narrowed. "You looked at his expenses. I looked at yours first. Figured out why you stopped approving them yourself in March." She went still. That was the tell. Not the flush in her cheeks. Victoria can fake a poker face for regulators. But the stillness. She hates being read from the inside out. Fine, she said, standing. Show me. I pulled the tablet off the kitchen counter, handed it to her unlocked, concurred dashboard, filtered to Julian's code. I didn't narrate. Let her scroll. Line item, Hampton House, exec strategy session, $4. 200. Guest count override manually bumped from 1 to 2. Approval stamp, auto sign via delegated authority. Line item, Greenwich Spa retreat follow-up, $1. 150. Notes field, V. Whitmore plus spouse equivalent. She stopped scrolling there. Spouse equivalent. She muttered, mostly to herself. HR's term. Apparently, Julian filled it in. He was being an idiot, she said, but the heat was gone from her voice. Now it was just damage control. I'll have him rewrite the memos. Reclassify everything. To what? Mistaken identity? Don't be a dick before 7 a.m. Don't let a man build a company for playing house with you, and then tell me I'm overreacting at a party. She shoved the tablet back at me. I will handle Jules. You handle staying off the proxy thread for 24 hours. We clear? We're not clear, I said, but you can handle Jules after 9 a.m. Call. Until then, wear the gray suit. Kowalski likes thinking you're conciliatory. She grabbed her coffee, took a sip, grimaced. Too bitter. Good. Might keep you from apologizing to the wrong person today. The town car ride uptown was a masterclass in strategic silence. She took calls back to back, never once acknowledging I was in the seat next to her. Julian texted her 3 times. I saw the screen light up, already at the building. Kowalski's in a mood. Want me to head him off? She typed back, conference room B. 9. Don't head anything off. Interesting. Conference room B is where we bury problems, not fix them. Glass on 2 sides. No windows to the floor. Evelyn was already there, flipping through a bound comp report, looking entirely unbothered by the fact that her best friend's marriage was currently conducting itself via subpoena light. Julian walked in at 9:03, 2 iced lattes in hand. One slid in front of Victoria. The other, he hesitated when he saw me. Oh, he said, recovering fast. Didn't realize we were doing the full Whitmore duo today. Love that. Efficiency. Shut the door. Julian, Victoria said, without looking at him. He did, still smiling. Sat down right next to her, close enough that their knees would have touched if she uncrossed her legs. Evelyn slid the printouts across the table. Expense audit. Q1 through present. Internal review only. No external counsel looped yet. Julian laughed, tapping the pages. Eve, come on. I told Nate yesterday. It's just bad categorization. I'll resubmit everything by end of day. You categorize a Hampton Club initiation fee as regulatory advisory, Evelyn said mildly, because the Hampton property was part of the Latham diligence. There is no Latham deal. Victoria cut in. Julian blinked. We scoped it in February. We scoped it and killed it in March. You kept the membership active through July. The silence in the room shifted. Julian's smile didn't drop, but it got smaller. He looked at Victoria like he was waiting for the punchline. She didn't give him one. I kept it, he admitted, softer now, leaning toward her like they were conspiring. Because you like the sauna. I figured we'd do the off-site there properly next cycle. It's literally a rounding error on the TE. Vic. I leaned forward. She doesn't like being called Vic in comp meetings. Julian ignored me, kept his eyes on her. If this is about last night, man, I already said I was riffing. You know I respect the hell out of both of you. Seriously, Nate, I'll buy you a drink after, and we can drop the audit vibe. Victoria stood up, walked to the glass, stared out at the floor. You called yourself my husband, she said, not turning around. On the floor, in front of Richard. I know, and don't apologize to me in front of them. Apologize to my husband. Julian's face did something ugly then. Just for a second, the mask slipped resentment. Or maybe the realization that she wasn't as shield him this time. He turned to me, stiff-collared. Sorry, Mun. Poor judgment. Won't happen again. I nodded once. Apology accepted. Resignation letter on Evelyn's desk by noon. Or I route these logs to the Special Litigation Committee, and we do it as a termination for cause. What? Julian laughed, looking at Victoria. He's joking, right? Victoria didn't move from the window. Julian tried again, voice cracking a little. She finally turned around. You heard him. You can't be serious. You need me for the Kowalski deck in 20 minutes. I don't, she said. Nate does. Kowalski didn't care about Julian. Kowalski cared about leverage. By the time Victoria and I walked into the board suite, Richard had already stacked the seating. Him at the head, the Chicago guys flanking, and an empty chair at the foot with a printed agenda that listed interim co-CEO recommendation as Item 1. Glad you could join us. Victoria. Richard said, not bothering to stand. Given the theatrics last evening, the committee felt it prudent to discuss structural safeguards. You've been running lean on oversight. Safeguards, I repeated, pulling out Victoria's chair for her. She sat. I stayed standing behind her, hand resting lightly on the back rail. You mean a chaperone? Richard smiled thinly. I mean a co-signature on Material MA while we sort out the optics of last night's little announcement. There are no optics, Victoria said. Julian misspoke. It's handled internally. Sure, Richard said, sliding a memo across the mahogany. But the Sentinel got wind of the anniversary remarks. They're running a short brief this afternoon implying governance confusion. Markets hate confusion. Victoria, you know that. The Sentinel runs what we leak. I said, finally taking a seat. And if you're briefing reporters off jokes made at a cocktail hour, Richard, we've got bigger problems than my wife's title. One of the Chicago guys, Mercer, cleared his throat with respect. Nathaniel, you've been largely absent from operating decisions. Shareholders want to see adult supervision on both sides of the Whitmore equation. Victoria's hand brushed mine under the table. Not a squeeze, just contact, acknowledging I was in the room as more than a prop. Here's the structure, I said, not looking at her, addressing Mercer directly. Victoria retained sole signatory on all operating MA. The proxy stays exactly where it is. And in exchange for not litigating the leak in tow, Richard withdraws the co-CEO language before close of business. Richard sat back. Or I exercise the supermajority block, replace the chairman at the August reconstitution, and the Sentinel gets a much better story about why Alder's longest-serving board member was taking meeting notes from a 28-year-old admin with a branding problem. Richard's jaw worked. He didn't push it. Not today. He just gathered his papers and muttered something about circling on the language. Victoria didn't say a word until the room emptied. Then she stood, gathered her things, and walked out without checking if I was behind her. We didn't speak again until the apartment that night. She came home at 9:10. Feverish. She'd been running on 4 hours a night for a week, and the adrenaline from the morning finally wore through. I heard her in the bathroom, coughing hard enough to make the medicine cabinet rattle. I got up, grabbed the thermometer, the ibuprofen, a glass of water, walked in. She was sitting on the edge of the tub, still in the gray suit. Jacket off, blouse damp at the collar. Don't, she said when she saw me, don't do the caretaker thing to prove a point. I'm not proving a point, I said, holding out the pills. Swallow. She did, grudgingly, then rested her elbows on her knees and covered her face. Julian emailed me from his personal account, said you ruined his career over a nickname. He'll land somewhere junior at a boutique in 6 months and tell everyone he trained under you. He'll be fine. You enjoyed it, she said quietly, not an accusation, an observation. I enjoyed you not defending him for once. She laughed, rough and tired. God, you're a possessive son of a bitch when you want to be. Possessive, I agreed, sitting on the tile next to her. Not insecure. There's a difference, and you found it today. She leaned her head back against the wall, eyes closed. For a minute, it almost felt like us again, pre-Alder, pre-IPO, when she used to fall asleep on my shoulder in law library carols. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. She reached for it automatically. I saw the notification banner before she tilted it away. Julian, you said he was just jealous. You let him humiliate me in front of Evelyn. I stayed over at the club last night, packing your bags. At least text back, stayed over. My stomach went cold in a very specific way. Not jealousy, confirmation. I stood, picked up her phone, and held it out. He says he stayed over to pack your bags. Victoria's eyes snapped open. He didn't pack anything. He was at the Hampton house closing the Latham files. There are no Latham files. You killed it in March. Remember? She froze. Read the text again. Read it like she was seeing the sentence in a different font than the one she'd been reading for months. He's lying. She whispered. He's just being dramatic because I haven't replied. He's not dramatic. Victoria. He's parasitic. He builds little myths, so you feel like you owe him access. You just happen to confuse access with loyalty. She didn't take the phone from me. Just sat there, fever bright in her cheeks, staring at the tile floor. I thought he was just useful, she said finally. I know. I didn't think anyone else was looking at it like that. They were. I said. The whole board was. I was just the only one impolite enough to say it out loud. She reached for my wrist, not the phone, my actual wrist, and held on. Her palm was burning up. The blue box. She murmured. From last night. Did you return it? It's in the safe. Don't, she said, eyes still closed. Don't put it back in the safe. I didn't promise her anything. Instead, I helped her up, steered her toward the bed, and texted Evelyn one line from the hallway. Freeze his corporate card. Change the Hampton Gate codes. And tell HR to escort him out if he shows up tomorrow. Evelyn replied instantly. Already done. Also, Richard's withdrawing the co-CEO memo. Guess who just grew a spine? I looked back at Victoria, curled on her side, shivering under a blanket she'd stolen half of every night for 5 years. You good? I asked her. She didn't answer, just mumbled something in her sleep that sounded like Jules. Hold the elevator, then corrected herself mid-breath, clutching the duvet tighter. Nate, she breathed out instead. It wasn't much, but it was the first time all day she'd said the right name. Tomorrow, Julian would make noise. Tomorrow, Richard would regroup. And tomorrow, I was going to open that safe. But tonight, I just turned the light off and let her sweat the fever out. The boardroom smile. Evelyn woke me up at 6:12 with a flagged PDF from compliance. Subject line, Sentinel embargoed snippet, running at market open. I read it standing in the kitchen while Victoria was in the shower. The piece didn't mention Julian by name, but it nailed the framing perfectly. Alder Company. CEO Victoria Whitmore faces questions over blurred personal and corporate spend. Sources say, including executive travel billed alongside a senior aide described internally as her work husband. Governance experts note potential conflicts ahead of the Q2 earnings call. Work husband. The Sentinel had lifted Julian's joke and dressed it up as an SEC concern. I texted Evelyn. Kill the embargo? She wrote back. Can't. They've got a receipt attached to the Latham shadow file. Somebody fed them the Hampton membership invoice. Julian. Of course. He wasn't going quietly. He was burning the house down on the way out so he could sell the footage. Victoria walked in 5 minutes later, towel drying her hair, already on a call with IR. No, tell them it's an administrative clerical error, not a governance issue. Yes, I'll be on the earnings webcast. Just keep the narrative tight. She hung up, saw my face, and dropped the towel on the back of a stool. Don't say I told you so. I wasn't going to. I said, sliding the phone across the island so she could read the article. I was going to ask if you still think he was just useful. She scanned it, her mouth flattened. He leaked my expense codes to a financial reporter. He leaked his proximity to you. Same thing in print. She gripped the edge of the counter. The earnings call is in 3 hours. If Kowalski sees this before the Q&A, Kowalski didn't see it. I said, Kowalski's the one who fed the reporter the governance expert quote. Richard loves a microphone when he thinks you're wobbling. She looked at me like she was doing math. She didn't want to finish. You knew he'd move today. I counted on it. That's why Evelyn moved first. I opened my laptop, pulled up the internal wire log Evelyn had sent at 5:47, while Julian was busy shopping a story to the press. He'd also rushed a signature page through Victoria's overnight folder, the Crestline acquisition MOU, the one with the broken EBITDA bridge. Victoria frowned. Why would he push Crestline? We already greenlit that. He didn't greenlight it. He swapped the appendix. Look at Schedule 14. She leaned in. Read the revised fee split. Her breath caught. He routed the success fee through a pass-through entity. Vantage Advisory. Vantage Advisory, LLC. I corrected. Delaware Shelf Corp. Registered agent is a mailbox in Wilmington. Beneficiary routing points to an Amex Platinum opened 3 weeks ago. Guess whose name isn't on it, but whose social popped a soft pull? She went very pale under the bathroom lighting. He diverted the Crestline fee, $4.2 million, and Julian, in his infinite sentimentality, labeled the seed transfer anniversary gift fund when he moved it to the operating wallet last night. The shower was still dripping. Victoria didn't move to turn it off. She just stared at the screen like she was watching a car she'd built drive off a ledge. He used my signature packet, she said, voice barely there. He used your exhaustion. I said, there's a difference, and we're about to use his greed. The Alder boardroom was a different temperature by the time we filed in for the pre-earnings huddle. Richard didn't even pretend to be subtle. He had a printed copy of the Sentinel piece face up on the table like a subpoena. Lovely morning for a call. Richard drawled as Victoria sat. Assuming our IR team can explain why the CEO's domestic arrangements are suddenly a line item in our reputational risk profile. Victoria didn't bite. She opened her folio, clicked her pen once, and said, let's stick to the Crestline close. Evelyn, walk the numbers. Evelyn did. Clean, clinical, exactly the way Victoria likes it. Revenue bridge solid. Synergy targets intact. For 12 minutes. It almost felt like we were going to get away with professionalism. Then Richard cleared his throat. Before we dial into the webcast, I'd suggest we address the elephant. Given the leak, I'm formally requesting Victoria step back from sole signatory on M.A. pending an independent TE review. Julian, who'd somehow weaseled his way onto the observer list and was sitting 2 seats behind Victoria, padfolio open like he still belonged there, spoke up, Dick, with respect. Maybe we don't frame it as a step back. Julian said smoothly, Victoria's under a lot of personal strain lately. Her husband and I have both been trying to keep things stable for her while the Sentinel noise blows over. A joint signatory just protects her from further distraction. Her husband and I. The room didn't laugh this time. They just went very still, watching to see if Victoria would let it skate again. She didn't. But she didn't say anything either. She just looked at me. I was sitting in the far corner, behind to Alvrig, out of the formal seating chart, exactly where Richard thought I'd stay. I stood, didn't raise my voice, didn't need to. Julian, I said, walking toward the long table. You keep using the word husband like it comes with HR privileges. Richard waved a hand. Nathaniel, this is a pre-call governance discussion, and I'm the governance. I said, setting the tablet down in front of Evelyn. Evelyn, would you mind reading the last transaction on the Crestline fee ledger? Just for the record. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She read the Vantage Advisory, routing out loud, paused on the amount, and then, because she's a sadist in pearls, read the wallet label. Anniversary gift fund. Julian's pen stopped moving. Victoria went rigid beside Richard. I don't know what that is. Julian said quickly, aiming it at Victoria. Vic, this is Nate dumping garbage into the call 5 minutes before earnings. Don't call her Vic. I said, still smiling. Not the big one, just the quiet one. Also, the wire trace clears it up. You opened a Vantage account with a utility bill from the Hampton Club. The one you expensed as a strategy retreat. The one you invited yourself on by calling yourself her husband. Richard tried to recover. If there's an accounting irregularity with a former staffer, we handle it internally. Former staffer. I interrupted, looking right at Julian now. is a generous title for someone committing marital asset theft during a live MA close. Legally, Julian, since you've been so insistent on the title, that makes tonight's fraud community property. Julian's face went blotchy. He stood up too fast, knocking his chair back. This is retaliation. You're manufacturing this because I made a joke at a party. You made a joke, Victoria said, finally finding her voice. It was ice, pure, unbroken, and then you forged my initial on a fee diversion to fund it. Sit down, Jules. Actually, don't. Get out. Vic, out, she said, louder. Security's already been briefed. Walk before they escort you. He didn't walk right away. He stood there, vibrating with the realization that the room wasn't on his side anymore, that the woman he'd spent 6 months cosplaying a marriage with wasn't going to bail him out in front of the chairman. You'll regret freezing that wire. He hissed at me, grabbing his bag. You don't know what I kept off her plate. You kept fraud off your own plate. I said, bad math. Jules. He left. The door swung shut. Richard looked like he'd bitten into a lemon. We need to delay the earnings call. Christ, we can't go live with this leaking. We go live, Victoria said. Standing, she adjusted her cuffs, smoothed the gray suit jacket, and looked at Evelyn. Add a footnote to the Crestline close disclosing a routine internal audit of the success fee routing. No names, no Sentinel drama. Just clean it. Evelyn nodded, already typing. Richard pointed a finger at me. And you sat on this until the exact minute. It maximized embarrassment. I picked up the tablet, slipped it back into my pocket. I sat on it until he called himself my wife's husband in front of you again. Seemed like the appropriate encore. Victoria didn't defend me to Richard. She just said, dial the webcast, and took her seat at the head of the table like nothing had happened. The call itself was boring by design. IR sanded the edges. Victoria delivered the synergy numbers flat and authoritative, and the analyst moved on to EBITDA multiples within 8 minutes. Afterward, in the elevator alone, she finally spoke. You timed that. I did. You let him hang himself in front of Richard instead of coming to me privately yesterday, because privately, you were still calling him useful. I said, watching the floor numbers tick down. Publicly, he was calling himself your spouse. I matched the medium to the behavior. She didn't yell. She just leaned her head back against the brushed steel and closed her eyes. The Crestline fee. She murmured, if you hadn't caught the appendix, you'd have wired $4 million to a ghost corp and spent the next year explaining it to institutional shareholder services. She let out a breath that sounded dangerously close to a laugh. I am so tired of being wrong about people. You're not wrong about people. I said, you're just loyal to the ones who make themselves indispensable. He learned how to do that from watching me. She opened her eyes, looked at me sideways. Don't compare yourself to him. I'm not comparing. I'm the reason he thought the act would work. He copied the posture, skipped the paperwork. When we got to the lobby, Julian was still loitering by the turnstiles, phone glued to his ear, trying to flag a cab under building security's glare. He saw us cross the marble and stepped into Victoria's path. Just let me explain the Vantage thing, he said, dropping the volume, playing intimate. It was a placeholder account. I was going to roll it back before close. You know I'd never actually steal from you. Victoria didn't slow down. I stepped slightly ahead of her, just enough to block him without touching him. Julian, I said evenly, your Uber's pulling up. Black Prius. Security's walking you to it. You think this makes you the hero? He snapped at her over my shoulder. She never would have noticed you if I didn't push her to grind this hard. You're welcome. Mun. Victoria stopped walking, turned around. For half a second, I thought she might actually swing on him, but she just tilted her head, cold and curious. You didn't push me to grind, she said. You just made it easy to ignore my husband. That was the only theft. She walked out the revolving doors without looking back. By the time we got back to the apartment, the Sentinel had updated its piece, quietly, without attribution, to say Alder had voluntarily initiated a routine fee audit. Richard sent a groveling email walking back the co-CEO language entirely. And Evelyn texted to confirm Julian's personal Gmail had just auto-forwarded a panic draft of a LinkedIn post claiming he resigned to focus on family. Family. Christ. Victoria was in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, holding the gray suit jacket, like she didn't know where it went at the end of the day. The blue box, she said. I'd taken it out of the safe an hour ago. Had it on the dresser. Still here. I said, open it. I did. The Cartier band caught the lamplight. I held it out, but didn't put it on her hand yet. I don't want a PR fix, she said, not taking it. If you give that to me because the board thinks we're a mess. Don't. I bought it 3 weeks ago. I said, before Julian decided to be funny. Before the Sentinel. Just because 5 years ago you signed a proxy and forgot I was the one who asked you to run the show in the first place. She took it then, turned the ring once in her palm. I let him make it weird. She admitted, and you made it quiet. That's why the board was scared of you today. Isn't it? Not the proxy. The quiet. The quiet. I agreed. She slid the box back toward me. Hold it. Not tonight. Put it back in the safe until I earn the part where you don't have to smile at people to terrify them. Downstairs. My phone buzzed. Evelyn again. Julian just texted me from a burner asking if we'll sell the Vantage thing NDA'd. He's offering context on Victoria's mental state during the close. I showed Victoria the screen. She read it, handed the phone back, and lay down fully clothed, facing the wall. Kill the NDA track, she said into the pillow. Let litigation bury him. And Nate? Yeah. Next time someone calls himself my husband in a room you're in, she didn't finish the sentence. Just pulled the duvet up and added, don't wait for earnings to correct him. I locked the phone, killed the lights, and left the ring in its box on the dresser. Tomorrow, we burned the last of Julian's paper trail. And if he thought an NDA was the worst thing he lost today, he hadn't been paying attention to the smile. Julian didn't take the hint. People like him never do. They think a scandal is just a negotiation tactic with worse lighting. By Wednesday, he lawyered up. His counsel sent a polite, poison-tipped letter suggesting Julian would be willing to clarify the Crestline administrative misunderstanding in exchange for a standard release and a neutral reference. Buried in the footer was a threat to file a whistleblower-style tip with the NYG if we pursued criminal restitution. Evelyn forwarded it to me while I was at the old apartment on 72nd. I didn't even reply. Just forwarded it straight to Victoria with one line. He's bargaining with your reputation. Up to you. She didn't answer for 3 days. Not a text. Not a calendar hold. The only sign of life was Alder's internal all-hands invite dropping into inboxes Thursday morning. Town hall. Leadership transition context. Transition, not transition. I called Evelyn. Tell me she's not doing what the subject line sounds like. She's drafting it now, Evelyn said, sounding tired in a way she never lets the street hear. She's taking herself out of the CEO's seat. Nate, keeping chairman. Nothing operational. She says if Julian's going to claim she was impaired by personal strain, she's going to make the lies structurally obsolete. She's punishing herself for his fraud. She's protecting the option pool. Evelyn corrected. If she stays in the chair while litigation leaks. ISS downgrades her voting control, and the junior associates lose their strike prices. You taught her how to read a cap table. Remember? She's just applying it. I hung up, stared at the blank wall of the guest room I'd been sleeping in, and realized Victoria wasn't waiting for me to manage this one. She was already halfway out the door, doing the one thing Julian never accounted for. She actually loved the company more than she loved winning an argument with me. The email went out at 4:47 p.m. Clean, unsentimental, classic Victoria. She owned the Crestline close as her signature authority, acknowledged the internal audit, announced Julian's separation for cause, and confirmed she'd be stepping down as CEO effective end of day Friday to preserve the integrity of the employee equity program. Interim CEO, Evelyn, until the January slate. She didn't mention me, didn't mention the proxy, didn't mention the anniversary. Just, accountability is a cultural product, not a press release. The markets didn't even blink. Alder ticked up 40 basis points in after hours. Julian, naturally, lost his mind. He texted her personal line, the one she hadn't changed yet, at 5:13. You seriously letting him force you out? I took the fall for the Hampton shit. At least let me help spin this. She didn't block him. She forwarded it to me. I replied to her, not him. Don't engage. She wrote back, already did. Then she CC'd me on the reply she just sent Julian. You didn't take a fall. You took a fee. Spin that. He didn't text again. Friday night. I packed a box of books and told the super I'd be keeping the 72nd place leased through the quarter. Force of habit. I figured she'd stay in the penthouse and let the silence do the cooling off. At 10:22, the intercom buzzed. It's Evelyn. The doorman said over the scratchy line. I buzz her up, except when the door opened. It wasn't Evelyn. It was Victoria. No mock-up, no suit, no laptop bag, just leggings. A hoodie 3 sizes too big, and the old Burberry scarf I bought her the winter we were engaged, frayed at the hem, smelling like the detergent she refuses to replace because it's fine. Nate, it works. She didn't step inside, just leaned against the doorframe, holding the scarf like a shield. Evelyn said you were holed up here grading term sheets. She said, I was grading your email. I said, leaning on the door jamb opposite her, accountability is a cultural product. Very TED Talk of you. She almost smiled. Almost. I didn't come for the edit. Then what? She held out a folded piece of stationery. Real paper. The heavy alder letterhead she uses when she wants something to feel permanent. One line. Handwritten. I mistook proximity for loyalty. And ambition for love. I read it twice. Folded it back without commenting. You didn't have to write that. I said, you proved it by not fighting the demotion. It's not a demotion, she said, voice catching in a way that told me she absolutely felt like it was. It's a reset. I made space for a man who thought access was intimacy. I owe the company the correction. And me? She wrapped the scarf tighter. I owe an apology that doesn't fit in a proxy vote. I stepped back, opened the door wider. She came in, but only as far as the living room rug. No shoes on, just socks, standing there like she was waiting for an exit interview. Julian called Evelyn this morning, she said, staring at the floor. Left a voicemail trying to offer context on my mental health again. She played it for me. He sounded proud, like he thought he'd upgraded himself to victim. He's a parasite. Parasites panic when the host stops feeding. She sat down on the edge of the sofa, elbows on her knees. I kept thinking you were just bored, that you didn't have a title, so you needed to manufacture one by picking fights with my staff. That's why I let him get away with the jokes. Because if you didn't need the title, then his little bits didn't matter. They mattered. I said, sitting in the chair across from her, instead of next to her. Keep the distance until she asked for it gone. Not because I care what he calls himself. Because you laughed. Every time you laughed. The board priced my influence at 0. And I built the leverage you're using to step down right now. She nodded, absorbed it. I know. You know now. I know now. She repeated, sharper. Don't make me say it 3 times like a deposition. I didn't. I just watched her. The way you watch someone come down from a fever and realize the blankets are soaked. You're keeping the chair? I asked. Yes. Good. Keeps the voting intact and keeps Richard from crowning himself emperor. She looked up. Are you going to use a proxy to veto my replacement pick if Evelyn screws up? No. I'm going to let her succeed so you can come back on your own terms. That landed heavier than I meant it to. Victoria dropped her head for a second, pressed the heel of her hand against one eye, and exhaled a laugh that wasn't happy. Christ, you're actually not going to gloat, are you? Not tonight. Silence. Long and functional. The kind of quiet married people keep when they're deciding whether to rebuild or just rest. I'm staying at the penthouse, she said eventually, but I'm not sleeping there alone for a while. Too many cameras in the lobby. Too many ghosts in the kitchen. Translation. Come home when you're ready, not when I order it. Understood. I said. She stood, looped the scarf once more, and headed for the door, hand on the knob. She paused. The blue box. She said without turning around. If you still have it in the safe here, leave it there. If it's at the penthouse, don't bring it by. I don't want the ring back. Nate, I want the part where you don't have to remind me who you are. You remembered today. I said. She nodded, still facing the door. Yeah, cost me a CEO title. But I remembered after she left. I opened the safe out of habit, stared at the Cartier box for a full minute, then slid into a plain envelope and dropped it in the bottom drawer of the desk. Not returned, not given, just parked until she stopped treating the marriage like a governance loophole. My phone buzzed. Evelyn. Litigation just served Julian at the club. He tried to record the process server on his phone. PR's killing the whistleblower threat. Also, she asked you to come home yet? Me. She asked me not to remind her who I am. Evelyn. That's the Whitmore version of a love letter. See you Monday. Sunday morning. She texted me a screenshot of Julian's LinkedIn. He'd posted a vague, humble brag goodbye to Alder, thanking Victoria for years of creative partnership. I didn't reply with a threat. I just forwarded it to outside counsel with a note. Add the LinkedIn to the defamation schedule. He doesn't learn boundaries. He learns discovery. 10 minutes later, Victoria texted again. No comment on Julian. Just bring coffee when you decide to come by. The machine at the penthouse still tastes like you programmed it. First time she'd invited me anywhere since the anniversary. I didn't say okay. Didn't say finally. Just black. No bullshit. Same as always. She sent back a single thumbs up. But I knew her well enough to hear the exhale behind it. The fall was over. Now we had to see if we could stand in the same room without counting votes. Julian tried to burn the last of the bridge on a Tuesday. His new counsel, some ex-federal prosecutor doing crisis PR on the side, leaked a carefully edited version of his departure to deal book. Sources familiar with Julian Vance's exit cite a toxic internal culture at Alder Company, alleging spousal interference in CEO-level hiring, and a proxy structure that sidelines operational leadership. Spousal interference. The little bastard had turned my name into a compliance risk. By noon, Alder was down 3 points. Short interest spiked. Richard, predictably, started texting Victoria about an emergency nomination freeze before the market even settled. She didn't call me. She called Evelyn, who called me. He's trying to force a special meeting. Evelyn said, Richard wants you both on a joint statement by 5. Tell Richard to sit on it. I said, and tell Victoria I'm taking the CNBC hit tomorrow morning. Evelyn paused. You sure? They'll ask about the marriage on air. You know how those bookers work. That's why I'm taking it. The CNBC segment was scheduled for 7:20 a.m. Pre-market. I didn't prep with IR. Didn't run talking points past Victoria. If I was going to kill the narrative, it had to look like a guy answering softballs, not a shareholder executing a media strategy. The anchor, Rebecca Myers, sharp enough to smell blood, opened exactly how Julian's lawyer hoped she would. Nathaniel, you've been famously behind the scenes at Alder despite holding the voting trust. But with Victoria stepping back as CEO amid this unusual leak from her former chief of staff, there's chatter about blurred lines. Care to address the personal dynamics? Rebecca smiled like it was a harmless question. Camera's hot. I didn't blink. Personal dynamics? Your wife's assistant, she said, reading the teleprompter's sanitized phrasing. Once joked publicly that he considered himself her husband. That clip's been circulating again. How does a couple navigate that kind of noise when one holds a proxy? I smiled, not the Julian performative grin. The one Victoria's board had already learned meant the ground was shifting. Well, I said, leaning just slightly toward the lens. Julian's always been better at nicknames than net present value. He routed a $4 million success fee into a shell company and labeled it an anniversary gift fund while telling the press he was married to my wife. So, yeah, legally, Rebecca, if he wants a title that badly. He also gets the marital asset theft charge. Funny how that works out. The producer's voice in Rebecca's ear must have lit up like a Christmas tree. She recovered fast. Tried to pivot to the stock dip. I didn't let her. The noise you're hearing. I added, is a terminated employee trying to short a company because he couldn't steal from it. Victoria stepped down as CEO to protect the junior staff's options, which, by the way, vest at a higher multiple today than they did when Julian was booking couple spas on the TE. So if we're talking blurred lines, I'd say the only thing unclear around here was his employment status. Rebecca laughed, genuinely this time. And the voting trust? Any chance you step into the operating seat now? No, I said simply. She built the empire. I just hold the door. But nobody else gets to hand her a drink and call themselves a landlord. We wrapped 30 seconds later. I didn't check the tape. Just walked off set, opened my phone, and watched Alder tick green in pre-market. Up to and change before the bell. Victoria texted before I even got to the car. You called him a landlord on national television. Me. Technically, I implied he was a thief. Landlord was the polite part. Victoria. Richard just withdrew the nomination freeze. Again, you're insufferable when you're right. Me. Pack the weekend bag. We're not doing the Hamptons, but we're doing the photographer. Victoria. You're really cashing the anniversary photo now? Me. I'm cashing the fact that you didn't say no. We did on a gray Saturday at the old beach house she insists we don't use anymore because it's inefficient. She wore the gray suit again, same one from the morning she finally fired him. And I wore the navy sweater she stole from me in law school and never returned. The photographer was a local guy, nervous about shooting a Whitmore after the deal book cycle. He kept asking if we wanted the tension softened. Victoria told him, don't soften anything, just shoot. When he lined us up for the last frame, he did the standard prompt. Say something nice to her? I didn't look at the lens, just at her. You built the empire. I said, repeating the line from the morning show because it was true, not because it played well. I just hold the door, but nobody else gets to hand you a drink like I do. She didn't smile for the camera. She turned her face into my shoulder, breath hitching once, just once, before she steadied it. I should have fired him. She murmured so only I could hear. The first time he made you smile like that. The photographer clicked anyway. Probably caught the exact second her hand found the back of my neck. Julian's NDA settlement got filed and sealed by Tuesday. Nope out. No reference. Just a permanent bar from contacting Alder affiliates and a quiet agreement to delete the burner accounts. Evelyn made partner-level money out of the interim CEO role and actually started enjoying it, which terrified Richard enough to finally retire the chairman gavel without a fight. Victoria took the chairman title formally at the August reconstitution. I stayed off the org chart, but there was one last thing. 2 nights after the photo drop, we were in the kitchen at the penthouse. She was reading the final draft of the new comm policy, the one that explicitly banned spousal equivalent language in expense coding. I was making coffee. Black. Noble seat. She set the draft down, reached into her hoodie pocket, and slid the Cartier box back across the island. Open it, she said. You said to leave it in the safe until you earned. I know what I said. She cut in, not looking up from her iPad. I'm revoking the condition. I opened it. The band was still there. Simple. No estones. The way she likes hardware. I didn't put it on her hand yet. I set the box aside and asked, why now? She finally looked at me. Because you didn't use the proxy to override my resignation. You let me fall on it. Then caught the stock, so I didn't have to. That's not a power play. That's a spouse. I slid the ring onto her finger. Tested the fit. Perfect. Don't get used to the gratitude. I said, Richard's already fishing for a co-chair again next quarter. She smiled. Real this time. Let him. You'll terrify the board before noon. I don't terrify them. I said, handing her the coffee. She took a sip, didn't grimace. You do, she said. But at least now I know whose side the smile is on.